Good morning, Asim.
Hello, good morning. Ashley. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank
Good. A little bit of a treacherous morning in
you. Yeah,
Toronto.
sorry. Last week I was sick, so I couldn't make it the last week. So I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sorry. Hope you're feeling better.
Yeah, yeah. I'm good. I'm good.
Good.
Actually, I'm in New Jersey, so
In New Jersey. Oh my goodness. How's the snow there?
no snow, nothing there. Just raining.
Nothing. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, actually, it was snowing while I'm taking off on the flight. So I don't know what happened in Toronto, but I think it's snowing heavily
Yes,
over the.
we have very, very tall snowbanks this morning. Yeah.
I just escaped. My
Yeah.
my sons are shoveling now.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Avi.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm okay. Yeah, my two kids are home. It's a snow day, so
The snow day.
we had to
Yeah.
get them outside so we can make snowmen,
Yeah.
snow people.
Ashley Ola said he'll be 30 minutes late.
30 minutes late. Okay, thanks. Yeah, he's in Saskatchewan, so I don't know what's happening there. How is it in New Brunswick?
So far, so good. All schools are canceled, but it hasn't started yet here in Miramichi anyway.
Okay. Good morning, Anna. Good morning, Solomon, Naomi.
I have this weird social phenomenon that's happening for me out my window where normally there's always cars parked on the street and I park on the street. And every night it's all, everybody's parked out there. And this morning I was like, wonder how my car is doing. And I looked out and my car is alone. And of course it's like completely buried, but I'm like, what does everyone else know that I don't? I'm like, where's their cars? It's just my car out there.
Oh my goodness.
I
He didn't
know.
get the memo.
No.
Park underground somewhere.
Yeah, I was like, where is the underground parking?
So maybe let's just give another minute. I also need to get a bit organized here. So, and then I'll introduce you, Avi. Oops. All right. Who else are we missing? Samantha. Has anyone heard from her? And I guess Hamlet. So why don't I just start, we'll just start with some introductions and then maybe others will sort of filter in as we're getting going. So let me introduce our guest speaker, who is a friend to this course. He's come back. I mean, I know you were here last year doing a talk. I don't know about other years.
Third year. It's my third year.
Your third year.
Mhm.
Wow. You're a frequent flyer, frequent speaker. Great. Well, welcome back again. So happy to have you. So for everyone else, Avi Biswas, Dr. Avi Biswas is a scientist at the Institute for Work and Health and an assistant professor in the epidemiology division at the Dalla Lana School of Public Health. His research focuses on promoting sustainable employment and preventing worker injury and chronic diseases through the development of effective and equitable workplace health promotion policies. And so Avi has a lot of experience with doing systematic reviews. And so today I think he's going to talk about his sort of real world perspective on conducting these types of reviews, and also his experiences with working with funding agencies, engaging stakeholder advisors, and then navigating practical challenges like timelines and staffing and all these perhaps unexpected issues as well. So welcome very much, Avi. I thought, we have a pretty small group. Maybe we could start with some introductions from others. You sort of get to know who's in the room. Does that sound good? So, so I'll start with I'll go sort of clockwise around my screen. And first up is Asim.
Hello, hi everyone, hi Abby, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Asim Mohammed. I am in this cohort 4, so this is my first year at the Doctor of Public Health program. I'm working also as Associate Director Evidence Generation in J&J. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to learn about the systemic review. We have done a lot of systemic review, but nothing in-house. We're always using like an external expert to do that. So I'm looking to learn more from you.
Thank you, Asim. Katie?
Morning, I'm Katie. I'm from New Brunswick. I'm a settler. I work at a Mi'kmaq Tribal Council here in New Brunswick in First Nations Health. I'm on the health team. Good morning. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Katie. And Naomi?
Good morning, everyone. Welcome, Avi. My name's Naomi. I'm from Ethiopia. I'm a medical doctor by profession, worked in public health policy on the continent for a while. Looking forward to your talk.
Thank you, Naomi. Mugove, are you able to? Okay.
Good morning. My name is Mugore Manchengwa. I'm a project manager in the Office of the Chief Medical Officer of Health here in Alberta with the government. So I'm also looking forward to the talk, Abby, as I think I might be I think I had a conversation with my supervisor, so we're thinking maybe a scoping review for my research. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the talk today. Thank you.
Thanks, Mugove. And Solomon.
Good morning. My name is Solomon Makuza. I am from Rwanda. My background is environmental health sciences. I actually remember during undergrad taking a course in occupational health and safety. So it's good to hear the work that you are doing. But my career has pretty much focused on maternal and child health. Yeah, looking forward to hear and learn from you.
Thank you, Solomon. Samantha.
Hi, good morning. I'm Samantha, and I'm based in Calgary, Alberta. I'm the manager of One Health at UCalgary, so looking at the intersection between animals, humans, and the environment, and different kind of wicked problems related to that. My background's epidemiology and health policy, and like my classmates, I'm really excited to hear you speak today, so thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And Anna.
Hi, Avi. Hi, everybody. Good morning. I am Anna. I work and live in Toronto. I work in the area of mental health, childhood mental health development, and I work for the Institute of Childhood Trauma and Attachment, where we do trauma-specific training and trauma-informed sort of organization transformation, that sort of thing. And I'm excited to learn about this.
Thank you, Anna. So that's everyone for now. Probably Ola and Hamlet will filter in a bit later, but I think we can get started, Avi.
Hey, well, thank you all for the warm welcome. And for those of you who aren't in Canada or aren't in Ontario, we have a pretty bad snow day today. And so I have 2 young kids and my partner's taking them outside, but at some point they'll go inside and you'll probably hear them running around. And so my apologies there, and that it might be a little noisier for you. And yeah, and so I really am looking forward to kind of reconnecting with this course. I've spoken here, as mentioned, this is my 3rd year. And when I was first approached to speak about reviews I was just asked, I was really given a clean slate and I was asked to speak about anything, and I thought, a lot of you might be looking forward to doing your own reviews, or you've conducted reviews. It sounds like some of you have had some experience, and I thought, let me just talk about my failures. And if I haven't scared you off, then maybe you're ready. And so I thought, and you may not get that opportunity to hear from a lot of people who talk about their experiences, and just to be pragmatic and realistic about the amount of work that goes into doing a review, and how to do a strong evidence-based as well as stakeholder-informed review. And it sounds like a lot of you are also working with stakeholders and are looking to maybe incorporate stakeholder voice and perspectives into your work. And so I'm here to share that perspective as well, and when to do that and how to do that. And depending on time, there is one breakout session, and so I'm hopefully that will work. I haven't done one in a while, so yeah, I'd love to get your thoughts, make this a bit more interactive, and at any point you have a question, just raise your virtual hand, and I'll try to answer it as best as I can. So I will share my screen, and I do have just something to give you some structure here. So let's see if this works. Can you see a slide?
Yes.
A slide that says my name on the left and where I work as a screenshot. Okay, great. So yeah, I'm here to talk about a bit about my journey into reviews, or what I've learned and the mistakes I've made, and of course, any questions that you have, and a bit about myself. So as Ashley mentioned, I'm a scientist and a professional researcher in my day job. And what I focus on is, as mentioned, I work on two aspects. Well, my organization works on two aspects of occupational health and safety, and we look at how work impacts health and how health impacts work. And so by work impacts health, we look at how working conditions, working environments can lead to health risks, and we develop evidence and policies and recommendations where we can support healthy work. And then how health impacts work is we understand ways in which we can support workers who have pre-existing or pre-existing health conditions, or conditions that have come about through work. And we support ways in which we can support these people to come back to work, to return to work. And so from those two perspectives, my own research, as was mentioned, I take a population approach. So I looking at big data. So a lot of my research looks at pre-existing survey, what we call secondary data sets. So from Statistics Canada, or from our health data registries. So if you're in Ontario, we have a health card. And so I work with the Ontario Health, the OHIP, the Ontario Health Card data that really tracks your interactions with the healthcare system. And so with that, that is, I look at the data, and I look at big picture, how working conditions can impact chronic disease risk as well as health behaviors. And an area that I really focused on is physical activity among the workplace, and how do you promote that? That's something that I've really focused on the last few years. And yeah, and I very much, at some point, you just have to do, you have to kind of take a step back, and evidence syntheses and reviews are really helpful in order to really present a case for doing the research that you do, and it really gives you a deep dive. And so over time, I've really developed some form of, I guess, expertise or experience through experiential learning, and I've learned how to do reviews. And I wouldn't say I'm in any way an expert, and it's not really my main area of research study focus, but it's something that I've just ended up doing a lot of. And over time, when you lead projects that are systematic reviews, people ask you to be on their projects, and hence I'm here to share with you my successes and my failures, as well as my recommendations. So does that all sound good? I hope it does. And I guess maybe I'll pause here for any questions. You have any at this point before I get into the nitty-gritty? All good? Okay, so talking points for today. I'm going to be, as I mentioned, talking about my experience. And I know somebody mentioned a scoping review as something that they would be interested in. So I'm going to be focusing on two types of studies that I've really worked on mostly, and those are systematic and scoping reviews and suggestions for how to make them stakeholder informed and how we do that at the Institute for Work and Health. And then if we have time, we'll do a short breakout room exercise. If not, I'll just use whatever time we have left to answer questions. Okay. And I can only see my face. So at some point, if you do have questions, just raise your hand, or I guess if you can actually just unmute yourself, or just let me know that there's a question. That would be really helpful. Thank you. Okay. So this is just to give you a sense of my experiences with reviews. And so I've been doing reviews now. They just kind of happen every year as part of kind of the work that I do. And you'll see that I've been highlighted in yellow are projects that I led. And by leading them, I was funded to do them by funding agencies such as CIHR with Canadian Institutes of Health Research, or WorkSafe BC, which is the Workers' Compensation Board of British Columbia, and sometimes also the Ministry of Labour, Immigration, Training and Skills Development here in Ontario. And you see that the general focus is around understanding occupational disease, occupational risk factors. I've done some work around sex and gender, and I'll be explaining that a bit, some of that work. And not highlighted is some of the work that I've done where I've just invited to help other people get started, and or just provide some perspective if it's on understanding the methodology of a review, to making sure that it's rigorous, and sometimes even a meta-analysis, which I won't cover today. I think it's quite a lot to cover what a meta-analysis is, but if you have questions, I can try to answer them as well, if that's something that you're interested in. And so these are the more recent reviews that I've worked on. And also, you'll notice I'm going to be also talking, you'll notice I'll be talking a bit about my past and my background that was prior to occupational health and safety research or work and health research, where I was working on a clinical cardiac rehab population for my PhD. And I did 2 studies there, which lended me with opportunities to be involved in other studies. People just thought, hey, that's Avi, he does reviews, or he did a review, can we have him on our team? So I will be sharing a bit of a perspective from my past prior to this scientific position. Okay. And so before this scientist position, when I was doing my PhD, I was at a department, kind of a sister department to the Dalhousie School. Oh, it is part of the Dalhousie School, but a sister department to your program, which is the Institute for Health Policy Management and Evaluation. And I did my PhD in health services research. And when I started, I didn't have a research background. I worked at the Heart and Stroke Foundation, so very much in health promotion, but not doing research, very applied. But I was interested in research. I thought that was where I had an aptitude and interest. And via a process of, I guess it was a Goldilocks process, where I kind of reached out to people and sought their perspective, and people who were funded by the Heart and Stroke. I found a match as somebody who I thought was really aligned with my interests in promoting heart disease, kind of heart healthy communication and research. And we landed on a study that had no, I guess, a thesis topic that I had no prior background in. I mean, I could understand from my own kind of behaviors, but we landed on a topic that he was researching that was very much not a hot topic yet, but evolving and growing in terms of evidence. People were actively researching. And it was the effects of sitting and excessive sitting on your health. And at that time, we kind of had a sense that sitting for prolonged periods of time was not great, but we assumed that was because you weren't exercising enough. And there was some research at the time that was exploring the effects of sitting independently of physical activity. So regardless of how active you are, what are your risks of sitting the rest of the day, or sitting for long periods of time in your waking day on your health? And we thought, because, well, my supervisor was a clinician and worked with cardiac population, we thought we would emphasize or provide some context in this work in a clinical population among cardiac rehab patients. And with these patients, if those of you who have had somebody in your lives kind of experience a heart event, they are typically recommended or referred to a cardiac rehab program. And what this typically is a clinical intervention where we promote exercise as medicine and exercise among a whole host of other behavior change strategies to really boost your recovery and your health from a serious cardiac event. And so that can include not only a prescribed exercise program, but also includes counseling, behavior change lessons and courses. There's guidance on how to incorporate a healthy, nutritious diet and things like that. But really the crux of the program is this 12 to 16-week exercise-based intervention. And it's graded in that it really starts from where you're at in terms of your heart health and your exercise capability, and then it really builds you up. And then the challenge we had was I guess what is the recommendation, or what is the prescription you can give to somebody who is engaged in the program but is sitting for the rest of their day? They're going home, and they're coming to the class, they're doing their prescription, but then they're going home and they're sitting on the couch, or they're tired and exhausted, and they just have to sit because they're fatigued and they've had a recent cardiac event. And so the assumption was there was quite a few people here in that situation. And so my thesis was to look at the relationship between physical activity or exercise and sedentary behavior or excessive sitting and health, or the health risks for cardiac rehab patients, with the aim to inform intervention strategies if they're required. Okay. And so when we started the project, it was thought that we really need to understand the evidence. What do we actually know in this area to be able to can get started, understand, are there any risks? What are the risks of excessive sitting on heart health? And then use that to be a map, a framework to be able to then, focus on developing thesis-based studies to inform an intervention for my research. And so my research had two main kind of systematic reviews. One was at the very start of my project with my first paper. And this is on the left from the Annals of Internal Medicine. And then the very last paper of my thesis, which was paper 6, it was about understanding what would happen if you were to come up with a strategy to promote movement instead of sitting on your health. And so that kind of we came full circle, started with a review and ended with a review in the study. And so for those of you thinking of a review, for me, my experience with a systematic review with no previous experience with review was that it really enabled me to get a broad sense and then focus and narrow down on what the risks are with a particular topic, in this case, excessive sitting, and then use it as a way to frame a potential intervention in the case of my second study. And so understanding what would happen. And I will be covering my experience with the study on the left, because that was my very first experience with a systematic review. Okay. And then with that work, while a PhD student, people just reached out to me and said, "Hey, Avi, you had some systematic reviews in your thesis. Can you help us with ours?" And over those experiences, I picked things up, as I mentioned before. And again, they're all kind of different and gave me different opportunities to learn new tricks and tips. And I think over time, I think I've kind of moved away from certain approaches, and I'm moving more towards incorporating stakeholder perspective in my research. And these studies, I have to say, did not have a stakeholder-informed perspective. And that was because one reason was it wasn't something that I was guided to do. And the other reason was it wasn't necessary for publication. But now that I am an applied researcher, I do very much support it, and I can provide some tips as to how to do that. Okay, so I'm going to focus on my past first of all, and provide some reflections. And this was my first ever publication in my life, and my first publication for my PhD thesis, and in some ways my most important study in my career, because I still get asked to comment on the findings, and I still get media requests. It's my most cited publication. I think I've had like 10,000 citations for this publication alone. And what was really great at the time was it generated a lot of media interest, because I mean the title in itself speaks for, I think it's very interesting because it tells you, you know, it purports to tell you that sedentary time has an association with disease risk, mortality, and hospitalization. So of course, you know, that sounds really scary. And when it did come out, we got a lot of positive interest. There was multiple news posts, media posts about it. And the very bottom right, there was a Globe and Mail cartoon about it as well, which we're very lucky to have, which is basically talking about the Grim Reaper carrying a chair now instead of a scythe. And it's just really, I thought it was really funny at the time. And it's also a study that I'm most embarrassed about. It's because I think it's a classic tale of recognizing that you know, there's research that can be quite impactful, but that there's sometimes a lot of nuance that gets missed when it comes to promoting research in the media. And I just want to share some insights as to what I hope to not do again, and tell you a bit about the story. And so before I get started about that, I thought I'd maybe share something really funny that came out of this study, which was a Jimmy Kimmel skit, which I thought was really cool at the time. So it's my little humble brag moment, but I thought this was really funny, but also I think just to draw attention to some of the kind of how the messaging got a bit lost, and it became quite extreme in terms of what people thought of excessive sitting. Did you hear that, by the way? Is that you could not hear
No,
what
no, we're not getting
okay.
audio.
Okay, so let's see if I can get audio. Always have this issue with Zoom.
Yeah, when you share, you have to select the share sound or something.
Oh, okay. Let's see if
Yeah.
I can try that again. Let's see. Share.
There
Share
should be like a
sound.
link to-
Perfect. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's try this. And let's see if you can hear this.
This is news you probably don't want to hear.
Can you hear that? Okay, great. I'm going to start again.
This is news you probably don't want to hear while sitting down. A new study suggests that sitting for prolonged periods of time can significantly increase your risk of heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and early death, even for people who exercise regularly. The study found that health risks are worse for people who sit 8 or 9 hours a day, which is all of us, right? I mean, they recommend taking a standing break every half hour. You have to get up to stand. Standing is a good thing to do. Unless you're at the movies, then you should probably sit down. But the notion that sitting for long periods of time could be hazardous to our health is very serious. And to raise awareness, I've been asked tonight by professional, well, it was doctors? Yes, to share this special message. Please turn now to your video screens.
Studies show that sitting can lead to heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and death. So if you see someone about to sit, lend a hand. And another hand. And another hand. And a foot. Friends don't let friends sit down. Paid for by Kevin, the guy in your office who thinks he's hilarious.
All right, when someone pulls a chair out from under you, that's how you know they care. They really care.
Yeah, so I don't condone that message. That wasn't my messaging. That was just a skit. I don't think it aged very well. But yeah,
But
it
it's
was
also, it's so cool. It's really cool that the first study you ever published was on Jim Kimmel.
yeah, it was really exciting. And I think I've just not been able to reach that high at the same point. But yeah, it was an interesting time. And then, you know, over some time, and I just want to see if I can, do you see my slide again? Or do you see my
Not
notes?
yet.
We
No.
see
Maybe
your,
I'll
Oh.
your
stop
media
sharing.
player.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, let me try again. Let's see. Just so I can, it's always a fun experience to do this. Let's see if I can share Zoom. Okay, where's my Zoom? Sorry about this. Let's see. I got it. Okay, great. Okay. Do you see my slides?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, that was really cool and exciting. And at the time, it was all, any news is good news, right? And as they shared, what we found in that study was that if you look at individual studies and you look at how they report the most extreme case of sitting, which is the longest period of sitting that was reported in each study, that looked at the effects of sitting. And so in this case, anything over 6 hours of sitting, and looked at associations with different health outcomes. We found that if we pooled all those different effects, we found that there was an average effect that was at the direction of an increased risk for heart disease, for diabetes, which was your doubled any other risk, and all-cause mortality, which is death from all causes. And so, that was the big message that came out of it, maybe attracted a lot of people to it. And what we did, what was different to maybe other studies, that we adjusted for physical activity. So we were recognizing levels of physical activity that people were doing. We thought, what happens then if we just isolate the effects of sitting? We found those risks still existed. Okay. And that attracted a lot of attention, but then it also attracted a very critical editorial. And it was something that I actually only encountered a year later. And I think it was maybe because I didn't read the whole publication in Annals, but there was an editorial which highlighted a lot of areas that should have been highlighted in terms of caveats. And so this is from the editorial, and it was, I think, very rightly said that while the review had considered associations, they're limited in their conclusions by heterogeneity across study methods for assessing sedentary behavior, and which is the key exposure variable. And so what that means is that there's a lot of variation across studies. Some studies looked at excessive sitting based on TV time, based on work time, based on what you report sitting. And so we kind of pulled it all together, but they're very different contexts and very different reasons and behaviors. And also, the studies themselves have adjusted or controlled for different factors that may have influence the associations that we may have found. So the diet, what people are eating when they're doing those behaviors may impact their risk factors. What their pre-existing health conditions are, whether they're healthy or have some pre-existing health conditions. And how even measurement, how are studies measuring not even the exposure of sitting, but the health outcome. And so he kind of lumped it all together. And I thought that was fine at the time. But it's something that, as very appropriately said, can introduce biases. And so I think what we should have said, or we did say at the time, but we maybe should have stressed more, was that sitting there's a potential association between excessive sitting and sedentary and health risks, but that we need to be careful with this recommendation because it's really just an association, and then there's all these caveats, and really need to do more research to really figure this out. And you'll notice with that Jimmy Kimmel skit, they use this as in our words, but and it's something maybe I did say at the time when I was asked to provide a recommendation, which is that to replace sitting, you need to do some standing. And interestingly, when I worked for the Institute for Work and Health, a senior scientist at our organization, who's now our president, did another study, which was to look at occupational standing and the effects of standing on the job on your risk of health, health outcomes. And we found that occupational standing is really the only setting in context where you have to stand, and you don't really have a lot of control to not stand. Sometimes you think of your grocery clerk, who's at the cash till, and most of the time I notice they don't have a chair to sit on and they're standing, or you have your server who's standing a lot on the job, and it's just really much promoted as part of the job. You stand for long periods of time. Well, when we're standing in our day-to-day, we stand, but we can choose to sit if we are able to, right? Or we have that opportunity because we can control it. And so he looked at that. What happens if you're standing a lot on the job and your health risks? And we found that he found that there was a lot of risk there too. And so what do you do there? Is it sitting or is it standing? And so when I joined the Institute for Work and Health, we actually tried to take our message back a little. And I'm going to share another video, which is to look at that risk here. So I'm going to share this page, and then I'll hopefully get back. And so we want to take the message back now in terms of promoting more of a moderate message. And so just let me know if you can see a video. Did you hear that? Okay. So then we created a video, which I think has now got about 160,000 hits. So I think it's really taken off. This is when I was a postdoc. Hi, my name is Avi Biswas. I'm a postdoctorate fellow at the Institute for Work and Health.
My name is Peter Smith, and I'm a senior scientist at the Institute for Work and Health.
And I'm the author of a study published in 2015 that found serious health effects of prolonged sitting. Our team looked at 47 studies and found people who sit for more than 8 hours a day have higher chances of having certain types of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, as well as higher chances of dying from these diseases. Most worrying, the chances of getting type 2 diabetes is nearly twice as high for people who sit for very long periods of the day.
And I published a study in 2017 that found people who mainly stand on the job have twice the risk of heart disease as those who mainly sit on the job.
We're really not contradicting each other.
Because when it comes to physical activity levels, the opposite of prolonged sitting is not prolonged standing. The opposite of prolonged sitting is moving.
So people who sit on the job should get up at regular intervals to minimize the risks of sitting too long.
And people in standing jobs should sit down whenever they need to.
To sum up, sit when you need to, stand when you want to,
And
walk or move when you can. So that was, so that was us trying to take our message back a bit.
Hi, Avi. Yeah, sorry for interruption, but I have a quick question.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so I see that you have now a more moderate, let's say, message about sitting versus standing for a prolonged time. But the question, have you done any research work about how long we should sit and how long we should stand? And do you have any empirical evidence on this moderate message?
Yes, I do, and I'm continuing to do. So the new physical activity guidelines for health look at physical activity as a 24-hour, or a movement as a 24-hour thing. So it's not just movement in the day, but your sleep is and all these, so your sleep, you're sitting, you're standing, and you're moving throughout a day, and all of these together, or independently, they provide health risks and benefit, right? And the quality of your sleep, how much you sit, how much you stand, and how much you move. But we're moving more towards recommendations which suggest that we need to be thinking about all these different behaviors and look at health. And so I'm doing a study right now which looks at all these different behaviors in working populations to see what is the ideal recommendation for a working population, for somebody who's in either a stressful job or in a demanding job. And so I can probably share that, and maybe there's some other studies out there that have I've done something else that's a bit like that. I think it'll just take me some time to explain to you the findings, but I can certainly share with you a lay summary of our findings around what is the ideal recommendation. But it's very much around the context of what you're doing in your job. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all message. It really depends on tailoring it to what you're doing. And I'd say generally I guess the basic message is move when you can, and some movement is better than none.
Yeah, so my question, maybe another follow-up question, and thank you for saying that, is because you and Peter have like different, let's say different type of research that have been done, okay? What kind of difference you have find when you comparing the two research you done? If the two research are systemic reviews, if it's systemic reviews, what kind of studies have been included? So it has generated, is there any factors or intermediaries that leading to this conclusion? Because, you know, here is the idea, and I think what I see here on the when showing on the screen about criticizing the work, that there is a lot of variables, a lot of methodologies have been or included in your analysis. Is that something you looked at deeply to see why we have this kind of different messages from research?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think, first of all, so our study was a review, and Peter's was a study that used a linkage between Survey Statistics Canada data with encounters with the healthcare system via health registries. And so his was a primary study that looked at a very specific population in Ontario, a working population, and maybe didn't have to address a lot of the heterogeneity that a review had to had to express, and the caveats that come with a review. Now that said, I think there have been reviews that looked at excessive standing and occupational standing in particular and found associations, but with the same caveats that, of course, there's heterogeneity, which means that we need to do more primary studies, more studies looking at original data. And so kind of going back to the work that Peter has done. But that says, I think that our message is complementary, because the message we're really promoting is that excessive of anything can lead to health risks. Even excessive exercise can lead to injury, can lead to, and there's some research around those who do hypermarathons and the impacts that it can have on your heart health, negative impacts. And so what we're promoting is really just moderation. And so there's a message that you can combine the two. And I think that, of course, yes, we're coming at it from very different methodologies, but I don't think research could really go forward if we're always having to really focus on just the limitations, but really address that, there can be learnings from the research, and that, of course, we want to build on the research, but based on what we have right now, that there's learnings that can be had. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. And I apologize, I've been going a little slower than I wanted to, but I may not have time for the breakout room, but at any point, please continue to ask me questions. And so since that work, I have moved on to doing research very much in the work and health space. And I'm just going to share a couple of studies around some areas that I'm really interested in, and the incorporation of stakeholders. So I think what I would have done in my previous work is also look at the messaging and see, how does this messaging resonate to the people? And I think reflecting on the messaging of promoting excessive sitting, I think it can be quite a challenging message for a lot of people who have to sit like on the job, or have to sit because they're tired. And that's feedback I received when I gave presentations. So I think I learned was to incorporate stakeholder feedback. And so these are two studies where where I was doing a funded study looking at how sex and gender, or gender differences and sex differences, can influence potential differences in occupational exposures. So exposures to different hazards on the job, as well as what are the risks that come from your sex and gender-based exposures. And so the thinking around this was that, men and sex and gender are quite different things, and this is the Canadian Institutes for Health Research guidance on it, and that sex is what we think of as biological and physiological attributes that we are born with and shape differences between people and their health responses. But by gender, we speak to social constructs that differentiate men, women, boys, girls, and gender diverse people in their roles, behaviors, expressions, and identities. And sex and gender is that we acknowledge that there's complexity, and that sex and gender can interact. The physiology and the behaviors and the other identities, expressions, roles can all interplay and interact with each other to influence our exposures to different things, as well as our risks, our health risks. And so in my perspective, when I did the study, we were understanding that the labor force can be quite gendered. There's different representation of men and women, as this International Labor Organization survey found, was that there's typical bucketing of men and women in the stereotypes, and that you see a lot of dominance of women in service sector occupations and men in more outdoors and manual labor occupations. But there's also a lot of parity as well. So you look at number 14 and number 95. So at the bottom of the left, you see hospitality industry, and in the other end here, you start to see a bit more parity of men and women in certain jobs. You see the food processing industry and manufacturing, you see similar levels of men and women. And now that being said, we tend to assign, even within the same jobs, we tend to develop our ideas of of tasks and of protections of health and safety protections around the physiology of men, around our understanding of the risks around based on studies that were designed mostly around sampling around men. And we're not really sure if there's a recognition of these sex and gender differences and differences in the type of tasks that men and women do in the same job, or the fit and the policy, the fit of safety equipment, the exposures of men and women in the different jobs, and so forth. And so we thought that it would be timely to do a review on that. Okay. And that said, it was important for us to understand the experiences of people in these who are having different exposures on the job, who have different risks. And so at the Institute for Work and Health, we incorporate an approach that was not developed at the Institute, but adapted, and I guess we have published on this approach in a certain way, which other organizations have now adapted and used as well in our particular way. And so what we do is we engage stakeholders throughout the process. And so when we did the study, we had a particular question. Do sex and gender differences, are they associated with differences in occupational exposures to hazards, as well as differences in health outcomes within different occupations as well as in the same occupation? I know that's quite wordy, but the gist is, are there differences by sex and gender? And so what we did was we developed an advisory committee of different stakeholders, and these represented people who have a stronger understanding of health and safety. So we incorporated HR leaders, health and safety managers. We incorporated people who represent unions to understand perspectives on policy and what is practical advice. We represented leadership, and we represented people who have strong knowledge of sex and gender. We had somebody from the CHR Sex and Gender Institute. We had representatives from Women in Occupational Health and Safety Associations. We had people from the Nursing Association, from the Manufacturing Safety Association, and so forth. And what we did was we had them all together, and I met with them, with my team, and we presented to them the question. And we said, does this make sense to you? And is this the right way to go forward? And would this be of use to you and value to you? And then we presented to them in an accessible way the research question, as well as the search terms that we would use in our research review, in our review, and we got their input. And then we asked them for any articles that we might not capture in our review, and they would forward to us anything maybe they had to any gray literature they had in their organization, which we may have missed, and allowed us to have a more comprehensive search. And then what we didn't do in this particular review, but what I would suggest is also consider having a stakeholder as a reviewer on your study, who may look at, if they have the time, look at maybe being more involved in the study, understanding the perspective of the researcher in going through the research steps. And then once we go through the research steps, we present to them our preliminary findings. So we do a reaction meeting, and we get their sense of, does this make sense to you? Is there anything we need at this point, at the this interim phase, anywhere where we need to really hedge our bets, focus on more that would be not only worthwhile to study and explore, but also of value to you and your stakeholders? And then we also get the perspectives as to how do we then, when we have our findings, package it in a way that will be useful to you. Okay. And so these are systematic review steps. The difference between a systematic review and scoping review is that we generally will omit this quality appraisal number 4 step, and it's generally more broad. We don't have to follow a very strict search criteria as you would in a systematic review. Now, the study in itself was quite big, and I'm sorry, Asim, yes, you have a question?
Yes, for the steps, I don't know if you are aware with what we call it the Delphi panel type of research. Is that similar to that when you have some, or what is the difference here? Yeah.
That's a very good question. I have an example on using a similar process to a Delphi panel. Like what the difference would be is, I think, the way in which we get we consolidate, we get, I guess, so the Delphi panel, for those of you who aren't as familiar, is that we basically get the reviewer or the stakeholders to be part of a panel where they not only assist us with understanding our perspectives, but they also ultimately they assess our evidence, and we come up with recommendations based on their assessment. So they essentially become part of our sample or our research team. And so the Delphi become researchers in the sense that we ask them for their perspectives in terms of reviewing and scoring the quality of evidence, and together we make a recommendation. While in this case, we are more working alongside reviewers. Reviewers are providing perspective, but are not, we are independent to them. They are more providing a perspective. They're not shaping the data in the sense that they're not shaping our recommendation, but rather they're providing us perspectives that we can use when we're doing our research, when we're trying to understand the perspectives that we're coming from. So that's a little complicated maybe for some of you if you haven't had experience with Delphi, but I do have an example of using more of a Delphi type participatory process, a scoring process, rather than this, which is we're really just getting stakeholders to provide us input throughout the research steps. Does that help at all?
You. That's clear. Yeah, I think
So,
you delineated the change, that being part of the research itself rather than being just a consultant to give a perspective to the researchers. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
And I'm just gonna say, do I have just 10 minutes or do I have a bit more time than that? I'm not sure how we want to space this up, Ashley.
Yeah, if you have more time, we can take more time. We can go beyond 10.
Okay, I won't go too long, but I'm now thinking I've already been 50 minutes. I might do the breakout room early so they can have a break at some point, maybe in the hour to just, give people a bit of a break. And then I have about another 20 minutes of slides, 20 minutes of material to talk through.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah.
To allow for questions. Okay. And so you noticed that with this review, we're funded to do a systematic review. And we ended up doing 2 reviews, and it became a scoping review and a systematic review. And the reason we did that was to be strategic for numerous reasons. We experienced numerous challenges. And so when we were funded prior to the pandemic. And the pandemic, when it happened, we realized that everything became slow. I'm sure you're working in your own working capacities, in your working context, everything just slowed down. We were all trying to figure out, how do we work while at home? And if we have kids, how do we, or caregiving, how do we balance that with our working lives? And so that was one of the main challenges it was for us in terms of meeting our deadlines. And so a project that we had said we would do that would take us 1 year ended up taking 2 years, 2.5 years. And when you do a study that's funded, most of your money goes towards staffing, salaries. And we quickly ran out of money. When you don't have money for beyond a year, how do you fund people? How do you pay for them to work on the project? And so staffing became hard. We were really lucky in that people started to volunteer the time. The Institute also gave us some extra funds to enable us to do the work. And so something to think about when you're doing a study is to recognize that research can take time. I've never completed a systematic review beyond COVID, but never completed a systematic review within a year. It's always taken me at least 1.5 years. And so there's a lot of work that goes into it. If you have more people on your team and you can support them in some way, if it's some incentive, then I would say try to get as many people on your team as possible. And then with COVID, communication. So we were meeting in person as often as we could when people were coming into the office. But then when you suddenly have to transition to Zoom, and when people can't meet up on Zoom as often because they have other things going on in their lives, communication became a challenge. And so it's challenging in a systematic review and scoping review process because you really need to make sure that everyone's on board. They understand how to properly rate studies, to understand what is your understanding of an inclusion criteria to include a study, as well as exclusion criteria. And so to do that, you need to actually meet and discuss and make sure that we're all on board and have the same understanding of something. And then satisfying stakeholder needs. So that comes with communication, but also stakeholders, they have their own interests. They come from different industries, come from different perspectives. If you incorporate leadership with unions, or, you're going to have totally different viewpoints on things. And so, when we have these meetings with stakeholders, oftentimes I say, I will try my best to incorporate that feedback. I may not be able to deliver, but I will try. And you also have to give them a sense of what is realistic. So when I meet, and I often have to share with them, I wasn't able to focus on the manufacturing industry or focus on nursing, because there was no evidence on them at the time, or there was no evidence on construction workers, which was a big area in which this funder was interested in construction workers, because there wasn't enough evidence. And then the funder was also interested, as COVID happened, on the effects of COVID, but we weren't funded to do that. And so really have to be, you have to be smart in terms of how you navigate stakeholder needs and expectations. And as I mentioned before, timeliness. And so just being aware that things take time and trying to accommodate expectations on when you can actually finish it, the project, and trying to also, and it comes also with good project management experience in terms of really setting realistic goals and timelines for what is possible for your team. And then, yeah, you have to pay people, and sometimes the software is also has a cost. So I worked with a software called Distiller SR. There's also Covidence, and they're all paid products. Luckily, my institution has them, but they're has licenses to them. But you would likely, if you don't have those kind of supports or have funds, you may have to think about that as well. Okay. And so our project got so big that we basically had to plead to our funder. We can't do a systematic review to tackle two major questions. What are the risks for, what are the sex and gender differences in occupational hazard exposures, as well as what are sex and gender differences in terms of the outcomes? So we split them into two different reviews, a scoping review taking us less time, and then a systematic review for the outcome. And it was a process, but we managed to publish. But then, you know, we didn't really get what we hoped for. What we hoped for was a clean, and I use this analogy of a, you know, I mentioned I have two young kids, so this is what I hope my living room looks like for, you know, visitors to our home, and that it looks, you know, everything's in order. We have, ideally with this review, concrete evidence and guidelines and policies that we can provide our funder as to what they can do to support men and women and gender diverse people in the workplace, and ensure that their health and safety is supported. But of course, as I mentioned with my previous experience with review, there's lots of studies, lots of variations in contexts, lots of variations in jobs, lots of requests and extensions from the funders. We had to, you know, and things weren't possible, and what we ended up having was just a mess. And it was a lot of caveats in our research. We were able to sort our research into towards, you know, recommendations based on the strongest or most rigorous studies, the most well-designed studies, but they were few and far between. And ultimately, we had to say that based on the balance of evidence, we found that there wasn't enough of an emphasis on sex and gender in the occupational health and safety research space for us to make a strong policy recommendation for what organizations need to do about it. Rather, we need to do more to emphasize more research, to do better research to incorporate sex and gender in studies, because we recognize that there is a difference, but we haven't done enough to really exhibit that difference. Okay. Okay. And now I'm going to just give, so maybe I'll pause here. Maybe can we maybe take a few minutes of a break? Is that okay? And I kind of and then to give you a time to kind of reflect, as well as if you have any questions for me, happy to answer. And then I'm going to get into this other study, which takes a different approach towards stakeholder integration, which is kind of hinting at what Asim was saying around Delphi process. Okay, I'll just pause for a couple of minutes, if that's okay. And I can take questions.
Avi, I actually have just a clarification question.
Yep.
You talked about the previous work and that you did both a scoping review and a systematic review. And maybe I just kind of missed it, but can you just explain again, like, what each one was addressing? Like, I assume it's sort of like slightly different research questions. Did the scoping review come before the systematic review? Like, does one inform the other? Just to kind of position them a little bit more clearly.
That's and a great question. And I just went really too quickly over these studies, nearly just based on time, but I can certainly go through them a bit more detail. So we had two broad questions when we received our funding. One was that we recognize that males and females may have differences in their exposure to occupational hazards because of what we assume are differences in their in the type of jobs that they do, the type of tasks that they do in the same job. And Also, maybe the policies maybe, or the fit of health of safety equipment may be geared towards the biological man and not maybe tailored towards the women. And so based on those assumptions, we assume that men and women or gender diverse people may have differences in their exposures to occupational hazards. Okay, so think of that as exposure to occupational hazards being excessive noise, exposure to fumes, exposure to carcinogens. And so those we call exposures. And then what is the next part of that research question was, what is the association between those hazards and health outcomes? So risks for injury on the job, risk for death or disease. And so in this case, there's two parts. One is looking at the exposure, one is looking at the outcome. And so what was important to our funder was to look at more of the outcome part, because they wanted to know that's more of like, okay, that can, if there's an association with diseases and health risks, then we really feel like there's enough evidence to inform a policy that we can draw more attention to policy. But of course, we want to also know the exposure piece. And so we thought, okay, well, there's a lot to do two systematic reviews on both questions. So let's do one big systematic review on two questions, because we found out that there were just too many studies out there. So a scoping review we thought would be the best approach for the first question. And what that is that essentially we look at the breadth of evidence, and our question is very broad. And so we don't have to really design our research study to have a clear population intervention comparator and outcome, what we call a PICO. Rather, we design it so that we say, okay, what are the main, what is a broad search strategy would allow us to capture within a certain period of time, within the last 20 years, the occupational hazard exposure literature around sex and gender. And of course, we forego a quality assessment tool, so we don't have to do a step where we look at the quality of studies. Rather, we use this to kind of comment on broadly, what is the literature telling us? And then we did a systematic review, which is more systematic, and it has a very stringent guidance on the steps you have to take, you have to do, and back to this. And I do have evidence of what a scoping review is as well in this process, but you have to follow this particular approach of, you start with a clear question, and then you do your search, you identify articles, you do a quality appraisal, looking at the quality of studies, you extract the data, and then you synthesize the evidence. Okay. It's very worried. Hope that was helpful though.
Thank you. Yes, that's helpful. Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay. Do we feel okay for me to continue, or should I give some more time? Feel free, anyone, to chime in too if you need more time. Okay. Okay. So, and I guess I'll go here, and I noticed that I do have this slide on scoping review. And so we do have a process to do scoping review steps as well. And you see that step number 4 is missing, but they are incorporating still the stakeholder informed process as well. Just a different, I mean, just with one step missing here. Okay, so I'm giving another example, which is a study I was also funded to do while I was a postdoc, looking at something I'm very much interested in, which is looking to how do you promote health promotion policies in the workplace? And my thinking around this is that we tend to, a lot of people tend to think that promoting health promotion in the workplace is on the onus of the worker. We have health promotion months, or we have lunch and learns, or we have yoga classes or education, which promotes, healthy nutrition and exercise and diet. And, we often do that once a month in the year if we can in workplaces, or workplaces kind of do it haphazardly, but they don't give it the same, it's voluntary, they don't give it the same emphasis as organizations do for promoting safety. Safety is seen as a critical thing, in that if you are injured on the job, we have to go through workers' compensation, or we have to think about how, organizations think about how we can impact their bottom line, or their, the ability for their workers to be productive and present on the job. But we don't tend to think of promotion, health promotion, in the same way. We think of promotion as leading to outcomes that take a longer time to show up in people. And the kind of the case the value and the case for it being of value to organizations isn't often very clear. And so we tend to pass the buck onto workers. We say, okay, it's great to have to promote healthy lifestyles for workers, but that's something you do on your off time. That's a behavior you should change. But something that I've recognized is that our workplace policies have a strong influence on people being able to change their behaviors, because we spend so much time in the office, and that workplace time, or we spend so much time in our workplaces, and that workplace time invariably impacts our behaviors at work and outside of work. You can think about it as being tired on the job. You're less likely to engage in activity or physical activity or exercise outside of the job because you're tired, you're fatigued, or it may impact your ability to make a balanced meal, nutritious meal for yourself or your family, and so forth. And so in the US, there's a stronger movement towards integrating health and safety with wellness. And there's a clear reason for that is that the US does not have a universal healthcare system like we do. And so the buck often gets passed to the workplaces. And so, when they see insurance premiums, they tend to then think more about how do you keep your workers healthy. When you don't have to, when you have a universal healthcare system as we have in Canada, we tend to have less research. It just happens on integrating health and safety and promotion. And so the challenge what I guess pitched to the Alberta Ministry of Labour and Immigration was, there's some evidence on ways in which we can integrate health and safety and health promotion from the US, but we don't really know what's actually feasible in Canada based on our particular contexts and based on the experiences of organizations and workplaces in Canada within our context here. And so I was funded to do this. And one aspect that I said was I wanted to do a review of what is out there and what can we actually learn from the evidence. And so I mentioned that a scoping review is a really useful study design in which we can really learn the breadth and depth of evidence out there. And it's more manageable to do than a systematic review. Of course, you skip a step. And it allows you to do a very specific question. And so what we did was we did a scoping review to look at the facilitators, barriers, and recommendations based on the existing evidence. We kind of looked at 3 different aspects of this question. What do we know by integrating safety and health promotion in workplaces? And what can we learn in terms of the facilitators, barriers, and recommendations? Okay. And so we did that review, and we followed this process. We engaged stakeholders. And we engaged about 20 stakeholders. And because it was funded in Alberta, most of these were within Alberta. And we had the gamut of different perspectives. We had people from healthcare, from different industries. Healthcare, because there's a lot of emphasis on health promotion in healthcare. But then we also had people from the ministry. We had people from unions. We had people from leadership, workers on the front lines. And they provided us with input, as I shared, in a similar way to way which we did systematic reviews. And then what we did was we incorporated an extra step. And so we did this scoping review as phase 1 of the project. And what allowed us to do was really enable us to then provide a sense of what the evidence tells us. And then, what Asim mentioned was a Delphi process. And so we did something like that, in that we got everybody together at a meeting in Alberta. It was at the University of Alberta's campus. We just had a full day workshop. And what we did was, myself and my team, we just presented our findings to them. And we had a series of, I guess, table-based workshops and brainstorming, where people had sheets and whiteboards, and they reflected on the findings I shared with them. And they worked together, and we kind of organized the tables where people had diverse perspectives. So, we placed somebody from a union with somebody from the ministry, with somebody from an employer representative, so from HR or from leadership. And we had them all kind of come together and reflect on the findings, and we posed certain questions to them. We said, based on what we shared with you, what would you say are your top 3 priorities in terms of the facilitators of integrating safety and health promotion in your organization? What are your top 3 barriers? And then what are your final recommendations? And so with that, we recorded our conversations. We had people come together, and then we qualitatively analyzed their discussions. And we came up with some broad themes. And we said, okay, so from these discussions, people were very much interested in these things. And these were kind of, based on the broader literature, these were most important to be able to apply our understanding of integration of health and safety and health promotion in the Alberta and in the Canadian context. Okay. And so with those learnings, we then did something like a Delphi process, which was we created a survey or a ranking process, and we sent out all the main findings from our qualitative assessment and asked all our stakeholders to then rank each of these different recommendations in their from 1 to 5, or from like most useful to least useful. And so we had 10 of 13 organizational representatives prioritize their recommendations, and we developed essentially a framework of guidance that people could use then as a roadmap to be able to implement the integration of safety and health promotion in their organizations. And so I guess there's for why I'm sharing this example for you is that there's a different way in which we thought of utilizing a review, and utilizing it in a way in which we encompass stakeholder perspectives in a way where it leads to an applied guidance and recommendation that our funder as well as our stakeholders can then take back and use. And so yeah, and this ultimately led to some great things. There was a health promotion campaign in Nova Scotia, Make Your Move at Work. It was provincially funded, that this kind of informed, and which was what a success story from this research. And so that was led to, and I guess it was nice that we used this, and it was, I guess, supported the value of this particular study design. Yeah, and so we essentially also we published this work, and we shared the findings from this process, as well as we developed kind of lay summaries and presentations and digestible materials that our stakeholders could take back into their organizations. Okay, and so I am done in terms of my main kind of discussion points. I don't know how we want to do this. I'm happy to stop now, and if you have other things you want to discuss in your class, I'm happy to just give a few minutes for questions, or if you think we have time for a breakout, I'm happy to do that too. And I know that there's a question here, Asim. Feel free to unmute.
Yeah, I think Hamlet had a question first, and then I
Oh,
can
sorry.
go,
Yeah, I can't really
can go
tell.
after. Yeah.
You see the chat?
Go ahead.
Was there any validation of the framework? He was asking.
Yes. No, we did not go forward with additional work to validate the framework. Rather, I think the validation came from the process in terms of having it informed by, I guess, validation in one way, in that we validated based on what is valuable and useful from the perspective of our stakeholders who provide diverse perspectives. But in terms of an actual validation, in terms of does it actually lead to programmatic success or implementation, no, we didn't actually proceed with that further. I just didn't pursue research grant funding to do that anytime soon. I think we just kind of thought of different studies, but if there's interest, I'm happy to, I mean, if there's interest, I'm happy to kind of pursue that. I just haven't done that at the moment. Yeah, but good question. Thank you for that interest.
Maybe, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I can go for my question. My question may be about, because I have seen a lot of publications coming from your work, and that's very admirable. So just to ask, is there any key remarks here about how to publish this work, where to publish, all of that?
Publish review studies or
Yeah,
publish in general?
No, publish review studies, yeah.
Yeah, so that's it's a question that I can't answer clearly, because it really depends on your field, depends on your question. I think in general, they're not all, okay, I guess to publish, first of all, ensure that you follow the recommendations to do a well-designed systematic review. And to get that information, you can get that from, of course, I'm sure, from Cochrane. So the Cochrane website, so COCHRANE, they're the Cochrane group, which publish systematic reviews. They also have freely available guidance as to doing a well-designed, rigorous systematic review. And so if you follow the best practices of a review, you're more likely to get published. And then in terms of looking for journals and to publish, I think ensure that your study is, it provides a message that is balanced. It's not just looking at providing a message that's provocative, but rather providing something that balances the evidence. And then thinking about a journal, kind of thinking at the end, that thinking of journals that publish systematic reviews. So that might come from, if you're more junior in your team or haven't had as much experience publishing, ask those who are more senior, more knowledgeable about the journals in your space and who are aware of journals that have impact, are read by stakeholders, those who, not just by the academic circles and the ivory tower, but read these journals that maybe have value to those who are, who are in the field and you want to make an impact, and also publish systematic reviews, because not all journals publish systematic reviews. And then the other thing is also think about publishing in non-peer-reviewed form. So, what I do is I not only publish peer review, but I also provide a lay summary. And that is with our communications department in my organization. We provide a 1 or 2 pager in very more lay language terms, and maybe in simple ways describes what a systematic review is, and then describes the ways in which we can, the ways in which one of the main findings are, and ways in which you can use the evidence in practice. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, no problem. Solomon.
Thank you for the informative presentation, Avi. I just I noticed that the step that is kept between the systematic review and the scoping review is quality appraisal.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds like an important step. I was curious, why is it, what's the thinking around skipping that step?
So yeah, that's a good question. So, and when you do a systematic review, the general purpose is to be able to provide so the way you design a systematic review is you make a clear, you have to very clearly outline the population, the intervention, and the comparison group and the outcome. So the idea is that you'll be able to then look at what the risk is for a certain population of an outcome, or what the benefit is of a particular outcome. So it's a very clear research question that has I guess the aim to be able to provide guidance as to what the risks or benefits are of a therapy, of an intervention, of a particular, and so it's designed for interventional research to be able to provide a broad kind of, or a very specific answer to a question. Does that make sense? So like you have a clear kind of answer that you're trying to develop. And so the reason you do a quality assessment is that when you provide that answer, you say, so in health and safety, women are at greater risk of cancer due to working in mines than men because of fit of masks or something like that, than men. You make that case, but then, and you can say that's based on the evidence, but that you would have to then make a case based on the quality of evidence. So we do a systematic review with a quality assessment step because, you would naturally say, why would I believe that if the evidence is very murky, if the studies were not done very well, they weren't done in representative samples and so forth. And so that quality assessment stage is very important because you have a clear question you're trying to answer. When it comes to a scoping review, you're more trying to understand what do we know in the broad field. We don't necessarily have to develop our study based on a clear population, the PICO criteria, population intervention comparator outcome. Rather, you're just saying, what do we know about health and safety in the workplace broadly? And so you can design your search to have broad criteria that can allow you to capture those studies, but you're not designing your study to be able to have a clear answer of to a question, to a research question, or like what is the evidence of the outcome. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure there's also research. I would advise just searching for the Campbell collaboration and the Cochrane collaboration, and they have some guidance as to the differences between the two. Yeah.
Avi, I have a follow-up question about the appraisal part. And I'm just curious, of the evidence appraisals that you have been part of, have you found that there's been like a tool that's ready, or do you find that you often have to adapt the tool or combine tools? What's been your experience with that kind of thing?
Yeah, so my experience is you kind of have to find a good midpoint between a tool that fits your need and based on the type of studies you have. So there's tools designed for randomized control trials. They're specific to them. They've been validated for randomized control trials, or been validated for prospective studies. And so kind of understanding the value of a particular tool and what it's designed to do, but also recognizing that some tools are like 5 or 6 pages long, and you have more than 50 or 100 studies to go through. It's not practical for your team to go through all of them. So I tend to lean towards a well-validated tool that doesn't take me too long to do. And there's some tools out there. And so it's just up to you to kind of look through them and see like, where's that good midpoint, that middle ground you can meet in terms of meeting the needs of a peer review, but also meeting the needs of your team and to be able to be timely in terms of completing your review.
Thank you. That's helpful. Sam, you have a question?
Yeah, just a really quick question. So going back to the beginning, you mentioned Covidence and then one other software. So I was just curious about the other one because I haven't heard of it and what you thought of it.
Yeah, so Covidence and Distiller SR. Okay, and so Distiller SR, my organization has an institutional license. Now I've been working with Covidence recently, and I've worked with Distiller SR for a long time. I think there's one clear benefit to Distiller SR and one clear benefit to Covidence. Covidence, I think, is quite seamless. It's very easy to work with. I think the license is a little cheaper, but I find it quite easy to kind of implement, like incorporate a quality assessment tool within the software, and there's very good response time in terms of help and support from the software. But with Distiller SR, it has one really interesting tool, which is AI. And so I've worked with this, which is that you can have thousands and thousands of articles in your first search. You can have over 10,000, 20,000 articles, and it can be quite a process to be able to do your initial screening and then read the full text. It has a process where it has AI via machine learning that can actually serve as another reviewer. And so what that is that you and your team, humans, will do a sample of reviews where you kind of together search the criteria and see whether your studies meet your criteria. And the software learns from your process. So it says, okay, in general, they're accepting these articles and not accepting these. So when you've trained the model, you essentially train the model and with a number of studies, and then you assign them as another reviewer a number of studies, where I give them, like, say I had 10,000 studies, I'll give them like 5,000 studies to do, and it'll do it in like a few minutes. And then, of course, you're wondering, okay, how do I trust what they did? So what you would do is then review through you would kind of skim through and see, is it doing a good job? So it's up to you to trust, allowing the machine to do some of this work. But there are some ways in which you can, check the quality of their work. An extra step which you can do is just allow everybody in your team to kind of check the quality of a certain assignment of the AI reviewed studies, and then and so I think there's a big difference there, and maybe that's of value to you. And feel free to reach out to me, and I can give you more information about that.
Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I agree. Very interesting. Does anyone else have I had like one more small one, but does anyone else have a question before I pop in mine? Avi, I was just wondering if so far in your career, you've ever done an update of a review that you have done previously.
Yeah, so I haven't as a lead, but I have been on a study where the lead investigator has been doing updates every few years. And the particular study is looking at financial incentives for physical activity and how financial incentives may be effective in promoting behavior change via physical activity. This idea of behavioral economics and giving people a reward or something to keep them active. And the idea that the reason they did that update, or they've done actually 3 updates since, is that they recognize that the space is changing all the time. Like when they first did the review, financial incentives was giving them a gift card or money, and then people would choose to use that gift card to go to the gym or have a subsidized membership to a gym, or just keep that money for themselves and just, via, just being a good person, thinking, okay, I got this reward, I want to exercise now, I'm more motivated, or I want to have more money, I want to get the next reward and exercise more. But then over time, with Apple Watches and with different ways to deliver incentives, or with apps and other things and other ways in which we can incorporate rewards, he's had to kind of redevelop his review to kind of incorporate those new developments in technology. And I know from others, so I'm also on another review with somebody who's doing a review on the impact of AI on health and safety. And they've done a living review. And so what a living review is, if you could, I haven't done any slides on this, but what a living review is essentially recognizing that this field is changing all the time. And I'm just going to, whatever evidence is out there, I'm going to just put it transparently on a website or on a journal. And do my review, but as more studies arise, I will continue the review indefinitely. So the review is living. And so you would see a lot of these reviews during COVID around, the effectiveness of vaccines or equipment, health and safety equipment and so forth, protective equipment. And now that's kind of transferred to AI-based research. And so that's an example of another type of review, a living review.
Interesting. Wonder how you fund a living review.
Yeah, I don't know. It would be great to be funded
Perpetual grant.
indefinitely.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
Money to perpetuity.
Yes. Nice.
Yeah.
Well, Avi, thank you so much for joining us. Sorry, maybe we wouldn't have time for the breakouts, but next time you're welcome to come back and we'll do the breakouts. But yeah, thank you so much for all of this really great insight, talking about your challenges. And I think, it's been really, and successes, of course, has been really helpful for us. I believe, speaking on behalf of everyone, seeing as where we are in the course, everyone's kind of at the point of trying to, develop their own sort of strategy and get to this sort of critical appraisal point. So yeah, so it's really timely and very helpful. So thank you so much for your time. And yeah, I wish you all the best in your future review endeavors. And thank you also for sharing how you do this stakeholder engagement. I think that's something I'm definitely personally taking away as something I'd like to look into more.
Great. Thank you for having me. And please feel free to reach out to me by email if you have more questions. Okay. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Enjoy the snow day.
Yes, you too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. All right, thanks everyone. I think everyone probably wants to stand up now, right? So why don't we take a 15-minute break? And then when we come back, I was thinking we could maybe just take some time to go over any other questions that you may have about your homework 2 assignment, now that you've gotten some feedback and maybe have had a chance to do a little bit more work on your search strategies or searching. And then we can talk about homework 3 just to kind of prepare you. That one's due after reading week. So so we can just chat a bit about that and see if there's any questions about appraisal tools. Okay. All right. So we'll see everyone in 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. So, I just wanted to start with checking in with everyone around the homework assignments, particularly homework 2, which you've done, and then I tried to give you a little more detailed feedback on. So just wanted to open the floor right now to see if there are any questions or concerns or challenges, clarifications related to your search strategy, which, you know, for the next homework assignment, we'll be using to pick out some of your key articles and practice doing an appraisal. So yeah, any thoughts, concerns, questions? Everyone's good?
Fine. Go ahead,
Oh,
Kate.
go ahead, Ina. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, these are not thoughts, concerns, or questions, but I did meet with Eden. And first of all, if anyone's thinking about it, it was very, very helpful. But also, I said I would mention to her the issue we were having getting into different databases. And she was like, I don't know, but I'm surprised. And we tested it together. Like I would try to click on it and couldn't get in, and she would click on it and could get in. And so she said she was going to mention it to the person at Gerstein who would get those kinds of things to see if people are getting them. And that if we experience again, we should email. I think I'm just looking for the email, but I'm pretty sure it was like ask@gerstein.com. Like it's whatever that sort of general email is. And she was like, they will look into it if people are reporting that that's what's happening for them. So I just wanted to report back.
Okay. Thanks, Anna. And so the meeting was helpful with Eden, like she was able to guide you on your search strategy?
Yeah, she sort of reminded me of, you know, when we had the class where you went over things with us, like when we were during burst week, she was doing them again, like the TW and the like all the codes and how they're different, and you know, to some extent it was helpful in clarifying things, but also just overwhelming in what I already know, which is that like it's overwhelming that the different databases do it differently, and that's really frustrating. And so at least for myself, Monday is family day in Ontario. I don't know if it's family day elsewhere. So I was like, Monday is search strat. Like I'm just gonna dive in and like I just feel like I have to set aside time to really try, and it's like a craft. It's like crafting it beautifully and then, you know, and so yeah, so it was helpful and it left me a little overwhelmed, but I know once I have the time to like sit down and dive into it, I will be able to. And she sends you like notes of the whole conversation and everything that you talked about. So I know that come Monday, I'll be able to sit down with dedicated time and it will be helpful to have had done all of that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that feedback. That's great. And then Katie, you had a question?
I do. It's about the assignment. Is that okay? Can I just put it out here? Okay, so some of your feedback was about, I have multiple things open here. So my particular search strategy, can you help me with the O, like the outcome? So it's difficult. Your comment was it's difficult to assess the impact or outcome without having a comparison. No, that's not my question. It's about outcome though. Right here. You can't talk about the intervention without considering the impact or the outcome. So I have I know what I want. It's First Nation, the population is First Nations, the intervention is appropriate data collection strategies and data governance and that whole like data realm, but what's my O? Or I'm missing a part. Can you help me with the part that I'm missing?
Yeah, I guess I was looking for, I mean, it depends. So your question could very well be just like what data collection systems are out there. That to me is more of like a scoping review question where you just really like looking at the landscape, like what is being used, what is, you know, like what are the options. But that's more of a scoping review question. If you're going to do something like a PICO type of question where you're identifying your population and your intervention, your comparator and your outcome, that's a little bit more of like a systematic review question where it's a little more narrow. You're looking for like specific outcome or types of outcomes. And then that kind of guides your search strategy as well. So both are fine. I was just thinking, like, if you're going down the road of, identifying your population intervention, are you also thinking as far as like the outcomes that you are looking for? Like, are there particular health outcomes that are, of interest, or that are particularly relevant? If you are looking at something as an intervention, it's good to at least, in principle, have something that you are kind of grounding it against. So is that compared to like no system for collecting data? Is that compared to a system that's been tried, but currently is being used, but isn't working very well? So I think having those, having that kind of mapped out, sort of like as your whole framework, I think can be helpful to guide you in your search strategy, and also like the inclusion and exclusion criteria that you'll be using.
Thank you. I want to do, the point of my question is for capacity. That would be the goal, less particular outcomes, but, or maybe the outcome is capacity.
Capacity, yeah.
Right. And then what am I comparing it to? No capacity.
Well, it's
crying.
Yeah, no, the comparison is more about the intervention. So if usually like in a PICO type of question, it's like we're comparing, formula with vitamin D versus formula with no vitamin D, or we're comparing like this behavior change intervention versus a control group that hasn't received anything. So, it's more about the intervention. So maybe if you can think of it that way, if there is, looking at, maybe it doesn't apply here because you're looking at kind of like, like data collection or like health data collection or systems. So maybe you can just sort of have in like your framework in your mind, like what is out there and being used, and how does that compare to, not having a system in place, or like having this type of a system in place that, where we can't really look at capacity. So, I mean, those are just some ideas. You have to see kind of what fits with your question. But
yeah, and maybe I shouldn't have put PICO at all, because it's not, I don't think PICO's the point. I just found something that used PICO and then I just cross out the C and the O. So so would it be just like pick a better framework, or whatever the PICO is?
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to use it. It can be a good way of sort of starting to think about it, but I mean, maybe you can't fill in the C because it's not amenable to the type of question that you have, which is fine. But I think, that's going to, if it's useful as a guide, that's great. But it just means that, like, if you're not doing a full sort of PICO type of question, it's not going to be more of like a systematic type of review. It'll be more maybe like a scoping review or narrative review.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. That's totally fine.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I'll jump in. First of all, yeah, thanks. I was reading your comments and like nodding the whole way through. So thank you for that. Sorry, everyone, mine's a little bit content specific, but I could use a little help from Ashley or maybe anyone. So I agree with one of your comments around the complexity of just AMR, and kind of with it being an intervention to use on school age kids, or the knowledge around it to help with their knowledge and behavior around AMR. So I agree with you that it's not like we can just teach AMR as a concept that doesn't make any sense for that age. So I'm trying to figure out how to reword my search strategy, because I think in a sense it's about teaching them about viruses and bacteria and kind of getting them familiar with the basics behind just science. So in terms of, I think what I'm trying to wrap my head around now is how to kind of keep it focused on AMR, but broaden it enough to just not be just science in general, but just a little bit more, I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to like, this is going to be my reading week task, I think, is to try and rephrase this. But I like agreed with your first comment, Ashley, and that it's a complex thing. I do think there's something in it in terms of getting them aware of AMR, but how that's phrased in terms of the curriculum. I'm struggling with that.
Okay, I'll let Anna jump in before I do.
It just made me think of a couple of like, and I could be way off base, and there's probably a million different ways to think about this, but it made me think about two options. Like, one, if there's actually a little mini review that you have to do first, which is what are those precursor things that you would be looking into, and then like even, and not that this is it, but even if it was like your applied research project is about, you already have an applied, but there's a step that's like, what are the things that are the precursor, or what are the appropriate things for school, elementary school age children, or whatever it is. And then you can do the review, like then you can do the other review, or perhaps a mapping review where you're like mapping out what exists on those specific things. But it also makes me think of what it was Avi, right? Like what he was just talking about, which is a process where it's like there would almost be a really cool I'm trying to say interested and affected parties instead of stakeholders. So where you could engage interested and affected parties and experts in a process of what are those things for children, and then do the review about it. So anyway.
I love that. I almost like that as a question all on its own. Like, what is it that, what's the even like content? Like, experts tell me what kids need to learn so that when they are faced with deciding if they need antibiotics, they have that basic understanding. Yeah, I really like that. Thanks, Anna.
Yeah, I was, my thinking is similar, in that, you know, to find what sort of maybe components of AMR, like to kind of break it down, and, you know, like there's sort of some key concepts in that sort of, you know, complex AMR picture that I think can very much be, you know, introduced to young children in sort of like in their language, you know, according to their understanding of the world. But to find out what those are, so I think like, you know, interested parties, which the interested and affected parties is like, you know, consult, that's definitely a good way to go. Maybe in terms of like your exploration of the literature, I don't know if your findings so far has led you down any of those paths, because it depends. Like if you have groups that are specifically doing like education research, they might frame it as AMR. Like, we are trying to teach young children about AMR. This is how we broke it down. So you might be able to find those things by looking for AMR, and then that can help you to search further. So like, oh, maybe I can search for like, you know, these more broken down concepts and see how, like, if there's something more specific to that that hasn't been like labeled as AMR as in the publication. And so that kind of maybe a little bit of like snowballing to kind of get you going with like synonyms I could use, different concepts, could maybe get you started. But I don't know, like if anything you have found so far has kind of led you there, or if that looks like maybe a promising path to try.
Yeah, actually, in kind of starting on more of the grade literature search, the Wellcome Trust just funded a giant curriculum development for AMR, and it's actually like grade 1, you know, bugs, like just talking about that. So yeah, that kind of turned into my go-to paper, and it's helped a lot. And this was after I got your feedback. But there's a ton of synonyms now. I'm gonna just steal directly from them.
Yeah, go for
Yeah.
it. No plagiarism
It's
there.
really cute. They're like grade 1 age curriculum is just super cute. It's definitely a little more like, what are bugs? What are we even talking about? Not even, it's like hand washing level stuff, right? It's
Yes.
yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Cool. Great. Okay, good. Any other questions?
I have a question. So in terms of some of the feedback regarding the different terms that in terms of terms to filter what you're searching. So as we're moving into homework 3, would it be beneficial to kind of redo that search of the like, because I used Cochrane the first time, and then I think there were some search items, like I used AI a lot, and that kind of really filtered the results that I got. So moving forward, would it be to go back and maybe use the different terms like actually artificial intelligence, or instead of marginalized groups, say underserved? So are we kind of redoing that process from homework 2 to kind of see what are the results we get before we move to homework 3? So what we did in homework 2, maybe repeat it, see what we get, and then move to homework 3 based
Basically,
on.
yeah, because
Okay.
for homework 3, you're essentially running your search now. And
Okay.
then from that, picking out those 5 like key papers. And this is original research, just to clarify. So like you're not choosing reviews, you're choosing like original research papers. But now this can be an opportunity for you to refine your search strategy. Like if there's things that you think you could change to make it a little bit, more relevant, more encompassing, then go ahead and do that before running your search, because you might now pick up things that are like superstars in your list that you haven't seen before, right? So I mean, this is an opportunity to like do that refinement before now running the search again, and then picking out those key papers.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Naomi?
Thanks for the comments. I also found them very helpful. I just wanted to ask, is there any room at this point for us to sort of like change our questions, or like and then we could, like, I think because part of homework 1 is also part of homework 2, like on the beginning, and then we're doing a little bit of homework 2 for homework 3. So would it be okay if we sort of played with our is it acceptable at this point, or should we just go on with what we have?
Yeah, for the purposes of this course, it's always acceptable to alter your question, pivot your question, because sometimes you don't really you kind of get clarity from searching the literature. So yeah, that's absolutely acceptable. What I would do is just not redo the homeworks, but maybe just add some notes like this is maybe how I would alter like the first steps. This is what I would change about my search strategy, like just to kind of add those like comments or notes or whatever, but like you don't have to resubmit the other assignments. But yeah, I mean, changing your question happens a lot. And I think this is also a good opportunity for you to kind of experience and practice those moments where you need to pivot, or you need to like dive into some other area to learn more about what you're doing, so it's like doing those things, but now having some more skills to be able to like navigate the literature and like search it quickly, know where to go to run those searches and how to construct them. So like you're not spending that time trying to figure out how to search the literature, but you can just do it once you feel like you know what you want to look for. Is that okay? All right. Hamlet, welcome.
Thank you, Ashley. I think the feedback was very useful. My thought, and there's a particular question around whether it should be qualitative versus something else. I think that was still sort of resonating with me. What else? Maybe not, if not qualitative, what else? And I think what has happened is that it helped to refine. So I'm seeing myself refining more and more the research question rather than the research. Maybe I don't know if it's the same thing for other persons, rather than the search strategy, but more and more refining the research question versus the search strategy. I think one of the challenges I have is the more you refine, then some of the things that you wanted to sort of explore in a previous iteration is still within the your search mind or whatever. So combining those and separating those, I think, is a challenge. But certainly for mine, one of the feedback around whether it should be qualitative versus something else. And then the second part is whether looking at governance barriers framework, using a particular framework or trying to get information without using a framework. That question, I don't know if there's any guidance around those two sort of large questions.
Okay, so you have kind of like three questions. So I think I'll start with the narrowing the research question part, which I agree that it should start with your question. So like your question drives everything. It informs your search strategy, it informs your inclusion and exclusion criteria. So I think, you know, if you are thinking of like narrowing, then I would start with your research question. And that is going to sort of, you know, trickle down to your search strategy and everything else. Where you might be narrowing your search strategy is like essentially so it's matching your question, because sometimes you might have a question, but then your search strategy, the way that it's constructed is like a little too broad, or maybe it's not as relevant. Like you can kind of see this like moving sphere of like your catchment, right? Like, is it too big? You know, am I capturing things that are not very relevant because it's too wide? Or is it just kind of like missing the mark? You know what I mean? So I think that's where playing with your search strategy is going to perhaps narrow or just shift to try to match up with your research question like the best. So that I hope that helps with sort of differentiating those things. In terms of the qualitative option, I was thinking more like not necessarily choosing between qualitative and something else, but like, do you want to be limiting yourself to only qualitative evidence? And what I mean by that is like, is there some quantitative evidence that is also going to be informative? And I usually myself see like research evidence, depending on your question, of course, maybe there's a type of question that really only lends itself to qualitative data. But I just feel like, you know, in the world of research and data, you can probably get useful information from both, and they kind of complement each other. So you might have mixed method studies. You might have some quantitative studies that are like answering a piece of your question that's very relevant. And then qualitative that answers another aspect that's also very relevant. So I'm just cautioning you against limiting yourself too much and potentially missing out on some useful and important information that could appear in the quantitative literature. Is that?
Totally accept that explanation. I think for me, it's totally purposive. It's totally a convenience. It's totally that's the honest answer around that. I think there is an acknowledgement that there's more, but like, hey, yeah.
And it might actually make for a simpler search strategy. If you're not trying to limit yourself, then you don't have to like think about how to put those sort of filters into your search strategy. You're just open to all study types. And then, you know, then your screening process is what does the filtering for you. And then your third question about the framework, can you maybe just give me a little bit more about your thinking
So
around?
my thought initially was utilize a particular framework. So I'd looked at in relation to at the time governance barriers in terms of healthcare implementation. And there was a World Bank framework around policy implementation. There's some other framework, and really structure my research questions around that framework to respond to those questions. So that's one approach. The other approach is, I don't want to say grounded theory because that's sort of too broad, sort of go and find out what people think, and then sort of respond to that. I don't know if that is the approach I want to go either. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of up to you, because yeah, two different approaches. I think maybe it kind of depends on like for your question that you want to ask, like, is a framework useful to you right now? Because I think where a framework can be useful, that like a framework that already exists, is helping you to kind of see the conceptual pathways that, can help you either to formulate your question. It can help you to think of, the key concepts that you're including and looking for. It can help you to create your inclusion exclusion criteria. Like, I'm looking at this part of the framework, but not this part. You know what I mean? So I think it can be very helpful as a guide. But if you're entering an area where you feel like, this framework isn't really capturing what I'm looking for, I really want to explore like what is out there, sort of like over here, or maybe related to this concept, but it's not really, this is not really telling the whole story, then that's like a little bit more of a scoping type of question, where maybe not grounded theory, but something that like doesn't potentially have an existing framework that really informs it really well. So like you're kind of looking to like fill out or maybe even create a framework, almost like grounded theory, but maybe not quite. But you're trying to create a framework, for yourself, for your own research that that is informed by the literature.
Mm.
So
that's a challenge between that line between, okay, going grounded theory versus utilizing some sort of framework or somewhere in between, like
it might be something in between. It might be something that like a framework kind of starts you on a path, and then something a little bit more scoping, sort of grounded theory, sort of continues you on, a branch of it that, isn't currently informed by the framework that you're using. So needs a little more thought, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm happy to discuss more if you like. Yeah, if you want to have a more focused discussion about it. Naomi?
Just a quick one for homework 3. We're choosing original articles, right? So it's just articles, right? Like we can't do books or stuff like that.
I mean, we're looking for original research. So essentially, like, research that like, researchers that have asked a question and, they've addressed that question through evidence that they've either collected or analyzed. So that could appear in a book. But I think more so because I think you'll find that in terms of the exercise of critical appraisal, it'll be they're kind of more suited to like original or like primary research, acts of science, rather than like, something you might find in a monograph.
So we can use the things that are mentioned in the books and then maybe go and look for them as well.
Yeah. I mean, if there's a study mentioned in the book, go for that original study, and you can appraise that one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else? We're kind of going into homework 3 now, which is fine. Any other questions about homework 2? Or your feedback? So I just wanted to reorient you to the course website, because we have here already some resources that can start you off for looking for an appraisal tool. So remember that an appraisal tool, like Avi said as well, is designed for a particular type of study. So for example, I think a good example here is the JBI has a very easy to find list of appraisal tools. So in the resources section of your course website, so I think it's like the second resources section on ecosystems of evidence reviews. So you'll find in there, the broken down by the various agencies or groups and whatnot. So JBI, like there's the handbook. You can click on that, open it in another tab. I've already done that, so let me just go here. And so here, let me go back because when you go to that link on Quercus, you'll get to this huge big page, but part of this page is a section on critical appraisal tools, easy to find. And then when you open that, you'll encounter a big sort of like list with sort of expand or drop down options. And it's organized by study type. So is it a cross-sectional study? Is it a case control study? Is it a case report, case series, et cetera, et cetera? Even, it has qualitative research here, quasi-experimental. And so for each one, if you expand it, you'll find either, just a downloadable, it's usually like in a checklist form. So you go through this checklist and, side by side with the study that you are appraising, and you kind of go through, and it asks you questions like, we can even open this one and see what it says. Like, did they use random sampling? Did they report their loss to follow-up? Those kinds of questions that you would then go through and say like yes or no, yes or no. And so this is like, these appraisal tools will typically be in this sort of checklist style. In some, you will also find, like, I think I looked at qualitative research. There's the checklist on the top, and then it will have associated publications. So, sometimes if there is, for example, something about a checklist that you feel like maybe doesn't quite capture everything in the study that particular study that you are appraising, if you want to know more about a particular aspect that the checklist is asking you to appraise, then there's other publications or resources that you can use to look into that further and learn a bit more. Let me pull up this checklist I just downloaded. Yep. Downloads. Okay, checklist for case reports. Is everyone seeing this Word document pop up, or I need to reshare? Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
All right, so okay, so I mean, yeah, it gives you a whole blurb at the beginning, and that can be helpful. So here we go. So like, this is literally like checkboxes, right? So, so here are the questions, like, were patients' demographic characteristics clearly described? Yes, no, unclear, maybe it's not applicable. So you go through these questions and you do your appraisal. And then, this, if you were to use this, let's say if you're doing a systematic review and you're including critical appraisal, then you can decide in the end, depending on how the study did according to this checklist, whether you want to include or exclude, or maybe you need to, look into it more, because perhaps there's aspects that this checklist is asking about that maybe the study it's not quite capturing what the study is about. And then, of course, comments like, you can comment here about the quality of the research and, whatever is helpful for you in terms of all the different studies that you're appraising. Okay, so that's typically what it looks like. Similar to the question I had for Avi, these have been designed according to, study design. But you may have a study that uses mixed methods. You might have a study that has an approach that doesn't quite match up with your appraisal tool. An example that I use, like in my PhD research, I was looking at studies using spatial analysis. And so I found like using a typical like appraisal tool for observational studies didn't capture the spatial analysis aspect of the methods. And so I kind of had to look for another tool or another maybe guideline, like a reporting guideline, and then adjust my tool by adding in those things, like just making some edits and adaptations. So you may find yourself in a similar situation where like one tool doesn't quite capture it, but maybe this tool captures a little bit more. So you can actually make your own, do a combination, or make, the necessary sort of adaptations to the one that you're using. But you should start out with something that's, that's like a checklist that exists. You can start with that and then see if you need to adjust it further. There's other, so JBI, of course, isn't the only place to look for appraisal tools. You can go through this whole list of, offerings by the different agencies. For example, the NCCMT, I've opened up this website, and it has, under tools, It has different options for other types of evidence that maybe you are finding in your, in your top 5 articles, but aren't represented by the tools that the JBI offers. So, for example, this group has a quality assessment of community evidence. So here's also a tool. I think I opened this, but it's not open anymore. You can actually download this tool here. It gives you a little bit of a description. You can download this quality assessment, and it's specifically designed for evidence gathered from communities, for example. So I encourage you to, once you have your top 5 picks, and then so you pick your top 5, and then you choose one that you want to appraise. I mean, typically it's going to be your number 1, and then browse around these appraisal tool resources, and pick one that is going to be the best fit for your number 1 study, and then include that in your homework assignment. And then, of course, if there's something that you feel like is like, it's kind of not the best fit, it's appropriate for the study design, but maybe not the best fit for this and that reason, you can include those comments, and then just maybe recommendations for what you would adapt or change or add to it. And so then what will happen, just to kind of like segue this into the paired appraisal exercise, which is homework 4, what will happen then is, we'll look at, as a group, what everyone has chosen in terms of the study they want to appraise and the appraisal tool they want to use, and try our best to match everyone according to, essentially, when you do the paired appraisal, you are both using the same tool. So, so ideally, you both have, studies that have similar study designs, and you can use the same tool to appraise each other's and your own, and then, do your synthesis based on that exercise. It might mean, if we have a huge diversity, that we might have to do a little bit of adjustments, like maybe you can't appraise your number 1, but like your number 2 does match up with someone else's. So maybe there'll be some adjustments needed, but just, for the purposes of this exercise, to be able to do this paired appraisal, maybe we'll need to just shuffle a bit. But for now, let's start with, your number 1 and relevant appraisal tool, and then we'll see where that takes us.
Do you want our updated search strategy information in assignment 3? I'm just looking at it right now. It doesn't state that specifically, but included in an appendix, or don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I mean, I'm very open. If you have done some adjustments that you would like to report, maybe you can just summarize in a sort of in a separate section, but it's not required. I'll assume that probably everyone has done some adjustments from the time that you've done homework 2 to now running your search, maybe incorporating some comments or feedback. You probably will do some adjustments, but you don't have to tell me necessarily. But it's up to you. If you maybe want additional feedback on what you've changed, then feel free to just let me know what you've done.
Thanks.
I have kept it in the same document, and just I don't know, but I highlighted yellow are the things that are 1 and green is the things that are homework 2. And then I thought I would also just add in homework 3 and just update things. Is that okay with you, or is that more confusing and you just want to see homework 3?
That's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the color coding is okay. Yeah. Fine. Asim, where can you find? Okay, so do you mean additional description aside from the sort of page?
The table of the syllabus? Yeah, I'm looking at that, but it seems that there should be some sort of additional descriptions, and I don't find it in the assignment submission itself. Yeah.
Oh, I see. On Quercus, there's usually a description box. Yeah.
So there is no detail. We just, what you describe right now is having the big top 5, okay? And it could be primary or reviews. It doesn't matter. Or it should be primary studies.
Should be primary studies.
Primary studies.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sorry, Asim, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, and then I pick the first one most probably and run the appraisal using one of the tools. Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll see in the, so there's one document that that, shows all the homework assignment sort of outlines. And so this one for homework 3, like I didn't, I decided not to put this into the description, but I can add more description if that's helpful, because I think it has the key points here. Like basically you pick your top 5 articles of original research papers, okay? And then choose one that you want to appraise. And then down below this table, you would then indicate the appraisal tool that you've chosen. So this could be like the title of it, maybe where you got it from, like the JBI qualitative tool or whatever. And then maybe, just a brief description. And then you have the option, if you want, in the appendices to include the full text article. And then also the if it's a checklist that you've downloaded, you can include that, or maybe just the link to it is fine too. Just so that there's some quick sort of, a quick way for me to look at what article you're looking at and which tool you're looking at.
Yeah, and I think the suggestion from Anna that having them in the same page could be useful for you, because I remember one of your comment that I didn't put the research question in homework too. So yeah, I knew that you need to go back to homework 1 to find it. So I'll put it together as well. Thanks, Anna.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Or just keep copying your research question, because sometimes I read it and I have to remember like, oh yeah, what was the research question again? It's just for me because I have a bad memory, but yeah, whatever is like most efficient for you, it's fine. Okay, so Hamlet. Oh, are you asking if you should appraise 1 article or 5 articles? Is that your question?
Yes, that's my question. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, okay, no, only appraise 1. Yeah, so like I'd like to see your top 5, but just choose 1 to appraise, which I assume will be the top choice, but doesn't have to be, because sometimes your top choice isn't very amenable to an appraisal tool, but you're only appraising 1.
And we're appraising 1, or we're not appraising 1 yet. We're gonna,
you're just choosing the tool. You're choosing the one you want to appraise and the tool that you would use to appraise it.
okay,
And then
so
homework 4 is going to be now the appraisal exercise paired up with, yeah.
So 3 is identifying 5 and choosing the tools that you're going to use for each one, or
For
for
only
one?
For only 1.
So that's identifying and choosing the tool. That's what you're doing for 3?
Yeah, for homework 3. So you'll basically report like, what are your top 5 articles, and then the one that you want to appraise, and then what tool you will use to appraise it. And then I guess we have an even number of, I think we have 10 in this cohort, right? So we should be able to do the pairs. We don't need a group of 3. Okay. Any other questions?
what's your favorite tool to use? Do you have a favorite one? Just depends on the study.
Depends on the study. Yeah, not really. I haven't used a whole lot of different types of appraisal tools. Yeah, I don't really have a favorite. I mean, just like Avi said, like there's some that are a little more user-friendly because they might be a bit shorter, a little more concise. Some that are very long and detailed. Those ones are a little bit more tedious, especially if you have a lot of papers to appraise. But yeah, so I think probably the short and sweet ones are good, so long as they're like validated and they're robust. Yeah, probably I would lean more towards those ones. So don't forget that next week is reading week, so there's no class, but we will see each other again the following week when your homework assignment is due. So hopefully, I can't guarantee. We might have to spend a bit of, I'll try my best to like look at your assignments before class and sort of like, see how the pairings might work, but we might need to spend a bit of class time, just going through it and maybe even as a group pairing ourselves up, which actually might be an interesting exercise. So, but anyway, but I will try to prepare as much as possible ahead of time. But I think the next class will be mostly dedicated towards looking at what you found, your appraisal tools, talking about them, pairing ourselves up, and then going forth to do your appraisals. And as of now, we don't have any more guest speakers scheduled. So our schedule is a bit open. I think, we'll see how things are working. I am happy to, put in another sort of like topic specific session. I know that Sue last year, she had a session on like data visualization. So if, I'm open to suggestions. So if there's any aspect of the, evidence synthesis process that you'd like to learn more about, like for example, Avi said he could talk more about meta-analysis, which he didn't talk about, but if there's something you want to explore more, that you feel like you may one day do, or you just want to know more about because you've never encountered it before, then I'm happy to do a session with a focus like that. So let me know. Otherwise, we're pretty open. So we're kind of focused on appraisal, presentations, and then la-di-da. All right. I think that's it for today. I mean, unless there's other questions or other things that you want to go through, I think we can call it a day and wish you all the best in your reading weeks as you spend the time, doing your deep dives. And we'll see each other in 2 weeks' time. And hope the winter weather is nice to you.
Yeah, I hope so. Actually, if you have a second after class, it's something I had a meeting with Mary, and I just wanted to quickly touch base with you on that after class, if you have a minute.
Yep, no problem. No problem. Take care, everyone. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Also, actually, I will drop you a note. I would like to have a separate meeting just for a few minutes.
Sure,
Solomon,
no problem.
I stole your spot, right, Solomon?
No. Complete. It's complete. All right, bye. Take care.
Take care. Thank you.
No, thanks for making the time. And apologies for joining class late. I had the most hectic week. So I'm currently in Kigali. We're having there's this NCD Alliance Forum meeting.
Oh, yeah.
I've had busy, yeah. So I've been having like back-to-back meetings. And then last minute, I was pulled into another meeting when I was supposed to be running to class. And it is one of a potential donor and all of these things. And they're just sucking the life out of me.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And I'm battling jet lag and all of those things and all the things that make life, for lack of a better word, exciting at this point. But yeah, thanks for understanding. Let me just grab my book real quick. But yeah, I did have a meeting with Mary on Tuesday or Monday, one of the 2 days.
It was Tuesday. I was in class and I saw that you were on Teams. So sorry I couldn't join you, but I hope it was a good meeting.
Yeah, and I actually, when she sent the proposed times, I wanted to send you an email to ask if these times were convenient, but I didn't want to put you under pressure. I also wanted to be respectful of her calendar, so I was like, you know what? I'll have a meeting with her and I'll let Ashley know how it goes, and I'll touch base with you later on. And I'll still send like key action points that me and her discussed during the meeting, and it's just copying everybody. But I think the meeting went really well. Thank you so much for the introduction. It went really well. She was quite positive, quite receptive. But yeah, just to like hit the nail on the head, let me open my notes. Just 1 second. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so we touched broadly on a lot of areas that she works in. And she does a lot, like a lot. And unusually, like I would imagine most times the challenge would be, this is what I think I can accommodate a student on. But in this case, she had just so many things. It now came back to me to decide, like, what can I do? Which was an interesting phase. So I kind of like narrowed it down. She has a lot of data from food products, so many things that I can work in, a lot of secondary data. So I just tried to narrow it down to like my interest areas. So one of the things she had mentioned is that she had done some work with PAHO in Latin America. So even like in terms of my geographic interest, I told her that quite frankly, I'm open, that I know that I indicated Africa, but to be honest, there isn't a whole lot from like what I've read and seen, like from a research perspective and work happening on ground and policy. So I think, given that this is what I'm doing with work, it would be helpful for me to learn from contexts where this has been done, at least for the purposes of my studies, and then replicate that further down the line. And also just from a practical perspective, I think it makes sense to work with what already exists as opposed to trying to create stuff that I can get, that I can struggle with later on. So she did indicate like a lot of stuff. I couldn't even capture everything, but I just highlighted the ones that I think could be of use. So she mentioned some stuff she had done with PAHO and a lot of data they had collected around food and food consumption data and a lot of that, and how perhaps some of it still needs to be entered and analyzed. And even though the project funded is over, there might be some opportunity there for me to like dig into some of that information, particularly around sugar products and stuff like that, that I can explore. The second thing she mentioned was that she had a postdoc fellow who's doing, and to this point, she had mentioned that my plan is to send the email and she can share more information on them that I can read up on. A PhD fellow working on stuff funded by, I believe it's Banting and Best. And that one is like a multi-country analysis around sugar sweetened beverages for various countries and stuff like that, which sounded really interesting. And then the other one she mentioned was she mentioned somebody, Nadia Flexner. I don't know if you've heard of her. Yeah, Nadia Flexner. She did a lot of analysis around some of this large data and did like and did like simulations as to the potential benefit of policy interventions in given countries, right? And it would report it in DALIs and QALIs and things like that. Aside of me, there's the health financing, health economics interest that I do have, which this would allow me to explore. And I had come across that paper like in a build up to my call with her. So those are like 3 areas. And she did mention like after the call, I can send her like some key action points and then we can take it up from there. But she did, but in terms of like tangibles beyond like these large research interest areas that I will need to narrow down once I have gone through a lot of this. Some practical areas were, she agreed that she could be a co-supervisor, so that was good. And as opposed to being the primary supervisor, I think the only snag there, and this is something where it could really help me out with information on, is that for them in the Faculty of Nutrition, the primary supervisor needs to be within the faculty. So in my case, I would need to get someone from Dalalana. So she needed to know if in my case, that was what held. And she thinks that, I mean, realistically, then if that is not the case, then maybe she could be the primary supervisor. But if that's not the case, she will most likely be the secondary or a co-supervisor, but she can sit on my committee. I told her either way, that's a win for me because just talking to her was a win. But yeah, so there's that little clarification that I'll need to provide to her. So there's that. And then in terms of other action points are these things that I mentioned where I'll be sharing the different areas and data points. She did mention that she also has access to just different associations and bodies and networks where we can get a lot of data from. And she has a lab that she's running and stuff like that. that I can pull data from. And just different networks. A lot of the work she's doing is around food and nutrition policy. Of course, she did mention things like the kind of student she likes, the ideal student, and all of that. Of course, motivated, on top of things, not a high maintenance student and stuff like that, which really is helpful to understand like expectations and stuff like that. She did indicate that she has some moderate bandwidth, so she can take on like additional students, given that she's technically retired, even though she has a few PhD students, postdoc, and she said she only has one master's student actually.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's kind of like how it went.
Amazing. Sounds like a great, fruitful conversation.
Yeah, I guess so. I was quite excited and happy after the call. Yeah, particularly, I also found I really like the idea that like she already has data that I can work with.
Yeah.
Because I think that really helps. It just sounds like it's a lot of data, and I think even sorting through that to reach like, okay, this is what the data set looks like, and then this is what one can chew and digest and make deductions out of. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was going to make that point too, that if I'm a big proponent of secondary data, and I think if the data is there, you can make a great project out of it. You know, you can ask a question of the data maybe that hasn't been asked before, or maybe it's being used for something that complements what you were interested in. So, you know, so long as there's a good matchup there, like, you know, it's an appropriate data set for what you want to explore, absolutely go for secondary data, because it really removes a lot of that timeline of having to like set up, you know, primary data collection, which, you know, is a project in itself. So it kind of, it also shifts the spectrum in terms of the types of questions that you can ask and address. So, and it sounds like to me, based on your interest and where you would like to explore, that having data already available would be really helpful for you. And again, if you're not sort of locked down to a particular geographical region, then that's helpful, because I think, you know, if you're not so picky there, then your options widen a lot.
Yeah. I'm not picky. Yeah. The world is my oyster. Yeah.
Great. Speaking of Kigali, right?
Exactly, right?
Yeah. But it's very true, because I think, you know, you never know where you'll find yourself. Everyone in the world eats food and has, you know, similar like dietary requirements and negative health impacts of bad diets. So maybe it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, really, it doesn't. I mean, I live in Canada. I'm from Nigeria. I spend a lot of time in Zambia, traveling all over. So yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, cool.
In terms of the supervisor question, so I mean, if she's willing to be your primary and has the bandwidth for that, I think there's a way we can do it. And I just have to make sure that I'm right. But it is true that your primary supervisor needs to have an appointment in the faculty where your program is. It doesn't mean that it needs to be her primary appointment. She's primarily appointed in nutritional sciences, but she can get like a cross appointment to public health. And that would allow her to be your primary supervisor. But let me just make sure that I'm right. That and getting that sort of cross appointment or status appointment, I'm not really sure what the terminology is, but it's not like a big deal. Yeah, we can do that.
I mean, she also did mention that I think my committee should be made up of like 3 people, right? So she talked about something around voting during my thesis defense or something like that, and how only those with full SGS status can vote. So it makes sense for me to have at least 2 people on my committee with full SGS status, something like that. I don't know. Does that make sense?
No, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true.
Okay.
Your primary supervisor must have full SGS status, but your committee members not necessarily. They need to have like faculty appointments. They need to have some kind of status in order to be a voting member of your committee, but they don't need to have full SGS status.
Okay, they need to have full faculty. They need to be like full-time faculty somewhere.
Yeah, they can have like, what is it called? I can't remember the different terms that's used, but yeah, essentially a faculty appointment to be able to be a voting member. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And it's even
Excellent.
possible, like, just so you know, it's even possible to have someone on your committee who is like, what's it called? I mean, the official terms that are used are going to escape me, but like someone who doesn't have a faculty appointment at the University of Toronto. It can be someone from outside, but they need to get some type of an appointment, similar to how
Yeah.
she would have to
Okay.
get like a cross appointment or a status appointment. Like
Okay.
basically voting members of your committee need to have some kind of an appointment with the Dalalana School. And in a lot of cases, it's not necessarily difficult to do that. We just have to be aware and like start that process. But I mean, for your final defense, you need to have, you need to have 3 voting members. So that can be your supervisor and 2 committee members. So it has to be 3 in total. You can have other people, it just means that they can't vote. But they can still be like a part of your committee, they can still provide input, they can still be a co-author. They just can't be a voting member in your defense. You need to have like 3, appointed faculty people to be voting members.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, maybe I didn't even remember it right, but yeah, okay. Then at least one person of those 3 has to have full SGS status.
Yeah, your primary supervisor has to have full SGS status. Yeah.
Okay.
So even sometimes you have the case where you have co-supervisors, because you might have one person who's a really good fit as your supervisor, but they don't have full SGS status. So sometimes you end up with someone else who is your primary, like on paper, because they have full SGS status, but they may not be the like primary sort of knowledge contributor to your work.
So what's the difference between a co-supervisor and being on the committee? Because the word she actually used was she could be a co-supervisor. That's the actual word she used, that she's willing to be a co-supervisor.
Yeah, well, she's willing to be a co-supervisor. So either in her head, she's thinking like, I can't be a primary because I'm not appointed in Dalalana, or I can't be a primary because I don't have that bandwidth. I'm not sure where she's coming.
Sorry, go ahead. She wasn't explicit about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she wasn't explicit. Though she did mention she definitely said she had moderate bandwidth. She also mentioned that that based on her own understanding, that based on how they work in their faculty, that a primary supervisor needs to be from the faculty. So I am imagining that she's envisioning a situation where she's a co-supervisor, and also has someone from Dalalana. And then there's also the extra layer about the DRPH being a new program. So maybe I think that's also another layer to ensuring that I get the right type of supervision, given the design of the program. And of course, having someone from the faculty that houses the program makes sense, or the school that houses the program will also make sense to having the ideal supervision relation and situation for me. I think she may have been considering all these multiple factors.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, if she's not that familiar with the program, which is one reason I kind of, I was hoping I'd be able to join your meeting in case she was unsure what the program is all about. But I think, as the program is growing, we're going to be like sensitizing more people about the program, because anyone can be your supervisor. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's from within the program. It can be, it can be anyone. They just maybe need to become more familiar with how this program differs from the more traditional PhD path, which most people are more accustomed to. So if she starts talking about things like, oh, your proposal defense that needs to have voting members and, whatever, like we don't do that in this program. So those little differences, and then also what the final sort of output from your program is. Like we're used to in traditional PhD path, it's like 3 publishable papers, which then, working backwards, that informs like your whole, study design. Like if you're focused on those 3 papers, it's kind of like the scope is a little bigger than what you would typically do for a DRPH project, which is like has, for one thing, a more applied focus. And for another thing is like, we want you to come out with something that's publishable, doesn't have to be 3 papers. et cetera, et cetera. So like those kinds of things, I think is just, to help people to orient themselves to those differences and what the DRPH offers that the PhD doesn't. And that I think that's good to have that conversation. Not that she is, needs to be excluded because she's not, from within, but then just, to kind of know how to orient also her thinking as she's advising you. But yeah, so I mean, all those things we can iron out. Maybe the first thing to do is to figure out, just confirm whether she can, like technically can be your primary, which I think she can, I'm pretty sure, but let me just double check. And then like sort of go from there based on, to see how your relationship is going to be. So she can be a co-supervisor. It means we need to find you a primary supervisor. And so then what that looks like on paper is like you have named supervisor and then named committee members. They're different roles. In that named supervisor position, you could have two. So they would be co-supervisors. Like Gladys has two supervisors. And then on top of that, you have your committee members.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How many committee members?
So I'm pretty sure that you need at least two.
Okay.
So that when you do your defense, you have at least 3 voting members, which includes your supervisor.
Okay. Okay. So at least 2 committee members and then your supervisor in the common case in which you have 1 primary supervisor, right? And then 2 committee members. So then it comes to 3. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
But then if I have 2 co-supervisors hypothetically, then I could have 1 additional committee member.
You could.
Or it could be more than that.
In fact, I think that's what I had in my case. I had 2 supervisors and then 1 committee member who could be a voting member, and then 1 committee member who was more like a community person. So yeah, so in the end, I had 3 voting members because I had 2 supervisors and 1 committee member.
Okay, this is super helpful. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is helpful. I'm happy at least I'm making progress. So
yeah. I mean, it's a really great start to meet someone who can be, supporting you and helping you to like start to actually design your dissertation research. So so that's great. And then do you have any plan, like, I know she's traveling now or something, so maybe like you'll meet up again when she comes back, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So my plan now is it's just that I've been traveling and things have been crazy. My plan now is to, in terms of practical next steps after this, like do an email outlining some key next steps that we've agreed on, stuff she said she will share, and particularly giving her feedback on this. And then perhaps based on that email chain, schedule a time when me and her can touch base again, which is what she had indicated, so that we can just like build this up. Nadia Flexner, she said she's also willing to introduce me to her if I'm interested in doing the kind of work she has done. And then maybe I can have a chat with her and get to know more about what that would look like. And then just, I think the key, before I meet with her, I think one thing that would really be helpful also would be for me to better understand amidst everything she shared and additional information she will share, what then do I want to focus on? And then that subsequent conversation with her can now be a little bit more focused. So I anticipate she is going to be traveling March, April. So I think that does give me enough time between me and her and Nadia to schedule, to go through the information, to reach a conclusion. She did also mention a postdoc. Depending on what I get, the person working on the work with funded by Banting and Best, if I might also want to discuss with that person as well, just to get a sense of what they're doing, just to better understand more broadly, because there was a lot of information, a lot of places, just to make that informed decision. So I think by the time she's done with the March deadline, I could see if I could schedule something in there. I think she's going for a meeting in Thailand. She didn't mention, but I suspect, I have a feeling I know the meeting she's referring to. But I could seek to schedule something with her later on in March, once I've articulated all of this.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know, how does that sound in terms of next steps?
Yeah, it sounds fine. And I think maybe I'll try to get an answer about the sort of primary supervisor question quickly, so that in your summary notes, you can also include like, oh, by the way, you
Okay,
can be
yeah.
my primary, or like you just some feedback on that to kind of
Yes,
you know, just get that clarified as soon as possible. Because then that will also help you in terms of your next steps for finding a supervisor or talking to her about finding a supervisor and committee members and whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that is also going to be a helpful piece because if she's going to be the primary, then navigating that conversation vis-a-vis what area then would be best for me to focus on, she would also be instrumental in that process.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's difficult to choose your committee members also until you have a research question. So
Exactly.
yeah, so kind of, yeah, we can't really rush that process. You need to know what you're doing first.
But one thing I've told myself is that I am not collecting additional data. I think this woman has so much data that I am going to make it work within the multitude of data that she has. And she also mentioned like there's some data for Canada that has just come in as well for 2023. Oh yeah, like 2023 data for Canada, I think around there, the food labeling data and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so she says like there's all of that too that can be analyzed. So yeah, there's definitely a lot. There isn't a lack of data on her side.
Sounds like it. Yeah. Well, that's great. That's a great option to have. So good. Great.
I mean, with each option comes its own challenges, but yeah, it is a good option.
Yeah, now you have too many options, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. But anyway, a good starting point though.
Absolutely. It's a better starting point. Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
But thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And also thank you for the feedback on the assignment as well. I've not gone through it exhaustively. I've started going through it, and I think there's a lot of helpful stuff there, particularly around like the limiters for the search strategy. Yeah, that would be helpful. And I think well, anyway, what I plan on doing is I will redo it. I'll redo it to pick my 5 papers because I kind of feel like everything needs to build off on itself. So I'll just incorporate that feedback and build it into the next one. Yeah.
Okay. And you know, if now after you've had this conversation with Mary, you are, you know, inspired to shift your research question a little bit, if it's helpful for you, feel free. Yeah.
I kind of have a strong feeling that my final paper here would be gravitating towards what I would be doing with Mary. Right. So
yeah,
I have
a lot of sense, because then it might give you something to build off of when you eventually do have to do your actual literature review.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Exactly. That's my feeling. That's my strongest feeling. Yeah.
Makes sense.
All right. Thank you so much for making the time.
Yeah, no worries. No, thanks for the update. And I'm so happy that it was a good conversation and sounds like it was really productive. So yeah, and then just let me try to get you some more information about the supervisor issue, and then let me know if there's anything else that that you need from our end.
Absolutely. And thanks for making the connection.
Yeah. Oh, no worries. Yeah, I think we had some good luck on our side. So worked out.
Thank you so much.
No worries. Well, all the best for the rest of your time there in Kigali, and safe travels.
Thank you very much.
Don't work too hard.
I'll tell myself that.
Keep telling yourself.
All right, then. Thank you.
Take care, Ola.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.